When did you start wrestling, Ashley?
I started training in November 2020. And then I had my debut 6 months later.
You started training during the pandemic era, which is something that is so different and unique to a lot of people's beginning training experience. For example, Mikey, you obviously started training during not such a restrictive period. Right. For you, that obviously has to put a lot of restrictions on, where you can be, how many people you can be training with, when you can train, all these type of things. Can you describe the kind of restrictions and loops you had to jump through in order to try to get your hours in, the amount of training you had to be in? What did that training look like during the pandemic period?
I love this question, and it's a long answer because it was like my whole startup journey. So my training was with Damian Adams, and that's where my solid 6 months of like progression from A to Z, or however far I am along, came from. But before that, so I started training with him in November. Back in like July or August, I had gotten a call from my friend, before, it was in like March, I got a call from a friend who didn't know I was in Florida right before the pandemic hit, because before the pandemic hit, I actually moved out of New York, was going to spend 2 months in Florida to spend some time with my family, and then I was moving to Spain to start teaching like fitness retreats and yoga retreats, and I was supposed to be in Spain. And then I was I worked at Equinox Gym, and I transferred down to the Miami Aventura one so that I could make some money in those 2 months before I head out. And I would see all over the TV about like virus on the cruise lines, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, that doesn't look good. And then COVID happened. So COVID starts to get bigger. And then my friend, I had been in Florida for maybe a month by then. And a friend of mine from New Jersey still called me, and he was like, hey, we used to live together in Brooklyn. And when I lived with him, he always tried to get me to go to wrestling matches or train. He's like, my friend will train you for free. Like, I just really believe in you, and I believe in your look, and like, you got to check this out. And I was like, I don't have time for that. Like, I just didn't have time for that. Like, okay, that'd be cool. I like anything that's athletic, performative, and I can travel with. But I just don't see how that's going to fit in my life right now. Sorry. So fast forward like 5 years, he calls me over the pandemic, and he goes, hey, everything's going batshit crazy. What are you doing on Saturday? I was like, I'm in Florida. So
yeah.
He asked me to move back to New Jersey and train. So I thought about it, and then I was like, okay, well, I was kind of seeing this guy at the time, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll move back up north. And I went back up north, and then everything just like shut down, and there was nothing. So that phone call got put on the back burner for a bit. I don't know exactly how things got brought back up, but I think he reached back out to me. His name is Joel Ruda, and he's still wrestling right now. I'm actually, this weekend, this Saturday, I'm going to be finally doing a match with him after all this. Yes. A year and 4 months I've been like going at this, or I guess since November 2020, and I haven't wrestled with him once yet. So, anyways, so somehow he got back in touch with me, and he's like, meet me here. It was at Gino Caruso's school in Lake Hiawatha, New Jersey. And I went in, I met Robert Saint, who's running the promotion for this Saturday. And he was like, I want to give you a full ride, full tuition paid for you to learn how to wrestle. And I was like, cool. What is it? Like, so like I didn't know like any of the terminology. It was a whole other language that I had to learn. Yeah. I watched wrestling growing up. It was my daddy-daughter time. So I would hang out with my dad. We'd watch The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Undertaker, all that stuff. And that was it. So whenever I think of wrestling, it makes me like feel endearing towards my father. And I was like, oh, I can't wait to tell him. So I wasn't able to start. I took a few days where I learned how to do like a bottom wrist lock, top wrist lock, hammer lock, a little bit of chaining. And then I went to my first indie show for WrestlePro in New Jersey, and then I got really excited. I saw Lady Frost and Raylan, or not Raylan, I'm sorry, Kylie Ray, I think.
Chicago gal.
Yes. This big smiley one, right? I haven't met her yet.
Oh, yeah. Oh, she's a sweetheart.
Okay. Well, it was the first female match I'd ever seen outside of WWE, and I was like, I could do this. That was like the first time I felt what he saw in me. Sure. And sometimes it takes someone else's belief in you. Bobby Lashley said this one time. I don't remember where, but he was like, sometimes it takes someone else's belief in you to make you better, or to find your true purpose. I forget the exact quote. Forgive me. But so that's when I felt that alignment. And then I was so excited to go back to train. And then my brother called us, like everyone in the family. My dad had a heart attack. And he had I'm sorry for the term, but it was like a stroke into a heart attack, and he brought him to the hospital in the middle of COVID, right? Ooh. And the doctor when he brought my dad in, my dad couldn't breathe. He was like, "Look, we checked out your father, and we don't think he's going to make it, and we also don't have the resources to really we don't want to try," because they didn't want to waste any resources because there were so many people in the hospital. So my brother was about to kill this doctor and said, "You better try everything you freaking can to save my dad's life," and insisted that they did surgery on him to keep him alive. And it worked. You know what? My dad is
awesome.
He actually passed and came back to life in the same surgery. So he's never dying. And
that's a fighter.
New knees, a brand new heart. Screw yourself. He's never dying. So
that's lovely to hear, though. I thought this was about I was like, she's smiling so much for where this story's going, and she's a psychopath. So thank goodness.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Right before that happened, I showed my dad a video of me taking a snapmare and then a little spot into a hip toss, and he saw the way I was landing. And my dad is a 3rd-degree black belt in karate, kempo boxing, and jiu-jitsu. And he looked at me and he said, "Jerry, if you're going to do this, you better learn how to fall. You better learn how to fucking hit." And he threatened that he would not let me wrestle. I'm 29 years old. He's like, you're not allowed to wrestle. Because when I was younger, he didn't let me do karate. I had to do ballet. And now I'm a grown-ass woman, and I want to fight still. So I was like, okay, I'll find a jiu-jitsu place in the middle of a pandemic that will let me wrestle.
Easy peasy.
Yeah. I left ECPW shortly after that, my dad had the heart attack, and I went to Florida, and I didn't wrestle anymore. I stopped for a few months, and then when I got back to New Jersey, it got brought up again, but they said to go to Damian Adams. So when I enrolled at Damian Adams, that was it. My training started. And at the same time, I found where the police officers had it was solely open just for the cops of that county to train in jiu-jitsu.
Oh, wow. Perfect.
Open. But I got let in because I was like, hey, I'm a wrestler and I need to know how to protect myself. And also I'm a female living in New York City. So can you help me? And they were like, yeah.
Perfect.
So I learned jiu-jitsu. And then after that, it was everything was so low key. At ECPW, they had a bigger group of people, and it was still on the DL. But where I was training with Damian Adams, it was such a small group of people. It was a private, he calls it a private club. You have to be invited to train there. Not just anyone can sign up and pay their enrollment fee and go. So it was so under the radar. We were able to train 4, 5, 6 days a week. There was nothing else to do but train.
Right.
So, yeah. We were wrestling. We would get there. It was technically from 7 till question mark, but I would get there at 4, and we would roll around, chain, work on basic stuff because that's all I really could handle because my brain was Damian Adams is all about the psychology of wrestling.
Oh yeah.
Every single day I'm okay, but I saw this movie. He's the moves don't matter.
Right.
Moves don't matter. Tell a story. That the training was just such a blessing in such a hard time that that Team Adams became such a family. We were seeing each other more than our actual families, you know? that's how my training started.
Wow, wild.
Yeah. And that's very important that you mentioned, especially there at the end, talking about the psychology being a part of your intrinsic beginning of your training, because I heard you talk about in another interview about how that's something you wanted to focus on in your development going forward, is that you want to develop your moveset and whatever, but the most important thing is your communication with the audience going forward, being able to put something out, respond with what you're getting from the audience, and that be the focus of what you're going for, communicating with them with something else, and that being your focus and storytelling. I think that is something that is the biggest key in the real superstardom of real professionals. So I think that that is the real mark of what you're going for, and the real mark of what has really been a big key to your meteoric rise. That's one of the big. Oh, you just got a thing. I don't know. I can't really read it, but
it says, "Viv, you have to shorten questions." I can
okay.
see you're trying to follow along. I'm trying to follow along. I'm like, is this a question?
No, I love it. He's commenting on
It's a conversation trying to talk, for God's sake. Sorry. It was a compliment. Well, there you go. That's the end of the comment. It's good on you for
sorry, I was trying to follow
stories.
the question. That's on me. I thought I was following a question. I'm like,
that made me think of a conversation that QT will come in and he'll coach. Like, I think he'll come like twice a week now, and whenever I can get in the ring with him, it's like get in the ring with him, and he'll go on he'll tell stories throughout. And I remember one time he was talking about his coach at AEW at a certain point. I don't know if it's still happening, but I know at one point Billy Gunn was telling him to like milk the audience for all they'll give you. And especially being someone who's so like hated in that arena, when you do something really shitty, and he'll stand up and look and just like acknowledge everyone, just booing, throwing things, like whatever the reaction is, let it roar. And then like his challenge for himself in that moment was to see how long it can go on for before moving on to the next part. Can you milk that moment for all it's worth, where you let them react to you so much that by the time they're done, you get like the full, you're not like, okay, cool, that was shitty, someone booed, now next thing. So like he's really, really good at manipulating the audience and pulling those reactions. And it's so cool because Damian Adams is wrestling, but I don't get to see him at the same, it's not as accessible as it is to see QT wrestle. Damien's biggest thing is telling stories, period. So I know they have similar teaching styles. So it was really nice to transition from New Jersey to Georgia when I moved down here for the Nightmare Factory. But like QT does it on such a scale that I can really see the way that masses of people react. And I'm like, that's and now I'm not such a baby face anymore. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Yeah, a little bit.
So I want to take you guys. I want to take the audience. Right. And when I'm in my head so much and I'm just worried about me and my opponent, that's not what it's even about.
Right.
So it's like, when am I going to get out of this learning curve where I don't have to worry so much about me and my opponent, where I could really like pause and acknowledge them and trust that my partner's on the same wavelength, to where we're both not rushing to the next thing, because I'm always the person rushing to the next thing. No matter how good I think a match goes, the number one feedback is slow down.
Right.
Like, what are you rushing for? They started to boo you, and then you moved on to the next spot because you were satisfied with one boo. You could have had 500 boos, or cheers if I'm a face that day. Sure. So it's like, I'm still, so it's, I'm like, how long does it take to understand this part? Like, refer to like one match and the next match completely gone. I don't know where that lesson went. So it's like, it's so like up and down. It depends on so many too, right? Like,
and to that point, something QT is particularly good at is identifying the peak of the heat and then bringing them back down rather than letting them start to fall and then go with them. He can identify like, okay, this is where they're going to be the hottest, and they're able to bring it back down. And something I was told, and now I tell others, is if you think you're going too fast, slow down. If you think you're going too slow, slow down.
Oh man. Yeah, that's definitely this. I've heard the exact same advice.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, at least I'm not alone in that. You know, we all go through that.
Oh yeah. And I mean, I think we all, especially because it feels like you're taking forever when you're doing something, but then you actually watch it back. And that's why I highly encourage all training as much as they can to be recorded. That way you guys can review their match rather than just being told like, well, if I can't see what I was doing, it does make it harder. But then you're able to watch it and you're like, whoa, that felt like I was 12 seconds and I was waiting. Like, no, you have 2.5 seconds and you were moving on, and you're like, what are you doing?
Right. The audience was just watching what happened, and now you're on to, and then they're like,
yeah.
Then you're wondering why they aren't popping when you want them to pop, because you're like, oh, didn't you see that I snuck in that eye rake and all that? Oh shit, I guess that's yeah.
It can take a long time for a lot of people to understand that. So that is a huge advantage you already have, in addition to being athletic freak. But